What does it mean to you? How has it changed you to marry Linda?
Nothing much changes me, does it? It's made me very happy.
At 86, Paul Hogan is reflecting on a life that few people could ever imagine. The Crocodile Dundee legend experienced worldwide fame, enormous success, and relationships that shaped some of the most important chapters of his journey. Behind the laughter, the blockbuster movies, and the celebrity image was a deeply personal story filled with love, sacrifice, difficult decisions, and unforgettable memories. As old stories resurface and fans take a closer look at the women who stood beside him through different stages of his life, one mystery continues to spark intense curiosity. Among the great loves that influenced his path, was there one woman who truly stood above the rest? Join us to find out. The question Paul Hogan faces at 86. There is something fascinating about looking back at a life that has already seen almost everything. Fame comes and goes. Money can be earned and lost. Awards gather dust on shelves. But when people reach their later years, their thoughts often return to something far more personal. They think about the people who walked beside them through the most important chapters of their lives. For Paul Hogan, that reflection carries extra weight. At 86 years old, the man who once seemed larger than life has entered a stage where memories matter more than headlines. Millions of people know him as the fearless adventurer from Crocodile Dundee, the charming Australian who conquered Hollywood and became one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. To the public, his story looked almost perfect. Success arrived. Fame followed. The world opened its doors. But behind the bright lights was a much deeper story. It was a story shaped not by movie cameras or red carpets, but by relationships, difficult choices, and the women who stood at the center of his journey. As the years passed, many fans became curious about a question that no award or box office record could answer. Out of all the relationships that influenced his life, which woman left the deepest mark on his heart? The answer is not as simple as many people might think. When people look at famous lives, they often focus on the biggest moments. They remember blockbuster movies, magazine covers, and unforgettable television appearances. Yet those moments only tell part of the story. The real story is usually hidden behind closed doors, far away from cameras and cheering crowds. Paul Hogan's life followed that same pattern. Long before he became an international star, he was simply a young Australian man trying to build a future. He did not grow up surrounded by luxury. He did not begin his journey as a Hollywood celebrity. In fact, his early years were remarkably ordinary. Like many people, he worked hard, faced challenges, and dreamed of creating a better life for himself and those he loved. What makes his story so interesting is that the people who entered his life during those early years would help shape everything that came later. As fame eventually arrived, it brought opportunities that few could imagine. Suddenly, a man who once lived a simple life found himself becoming a household name around the world. Audiences loved his humor, his confidence, and his unique personality. He became one of Australia's greatest entertainment exports, and his success reached levels that even he may never have expected. But success has a way of changing everything around it. The same fame that opens new doors can also create unexpected distance. The same spotlight that attracts admiration can place enormous pressure on relationships. The same opportunities that seem exciting can quietly test even the strongest bonds. Over time, Paul Hogan would discover that personal relationships often face challenges that money and success cannot solve. This is one reason his story continues to capture attention decades later. It is not only a story about becoming famous, it is also a story about balancing love, family, ambition, and responsibility, while the entire world watches. As he grew older, Hogan became increasingly open about looking back on his life. Instead of presenting himself as a perfect hero, he appeared willing to acknowledge mistakes, regrets, and lessons learned. That honesty gave fans a rare glimpse behind the public image they had known for years. People often expect famous figures to protect their reputations at all costs. Yet some of the most powerful moments come when a person reflects honestly on the decisions that shaped their journey. For Hogan, Those reflections naturally brought attention back to the women who played important roles in different stages of his life. One woman knew him before the fame, before the fortune, and before the world recognized his name. She witnessed the early struggles, the uncertainties, and the hard work that laid the foundation for everything that followed. Another woman entered his life when success had already arrived. She shared some of the most famous years of his career and became part of a love story that attracted worldwide attention. Both relationships represented different chapters. Both carried their own joys and challenges, and both helped shape the man audiences came to know. That is why the question of who meant the most is far more complicated than choosing one name over another. Sometimes the people who influence us do so in completely different ways. One person may help build the foundation. Another may help define an unforgettable chapter. Comparing those impacts is never easy. Yet this complexity is exactly what makes Paul Hogan's story so human. Behind the celebrity was a man experiencing the same emotions many people face throughout life. Love, commitment, sacrifice, disappointment, gratitude, and reflection are experiences that connect all people, regardless of fame or fortune. As we begin exploring the women who shaped his remarkable journey, it becomes clear that understanding Paul Hogan requires looking beyond the movie star image. To understand the man he became, we first need to understand the life he lived before the world knew his name. And that journey begins with a young woman who stood beside him during the years when success was still only a distant dream. A woman whose presence would influence the foundation of everything that came next. The woman who believed in him before fame. Before Paul Hogan became one of the most recognizable faces in the world, he was simply a young man trying to build a stable life. There were no movie premieres waiting for him, no international fame on the horizon, and certainly no signs that he would one day become a global entertainment icon. His future was uncertain, just like it is for countless young people starting out in life. During those early years, one person became a central part of his world. That woman was Noeline Edwards. Long before audiences cheered for him on cinema screens, Noeline knew the version of Paul Hogan that the public would never see. She knew him before success transformed his life. She knew him when his days were filled with ordinary responsibilities rather than celebrity appearances. Their relationship developed during a period when neither of them could have predicted what the future would bring. Like many young couples of their generation, they were focused on building a family and creating a secure future. Life was not glamorous. It revolved around work, responsibilities, and the everyday challenges that come with raising children and maintaining a household. The spotlight that would later follow Hogan everywhere was nowhere to be found. What makes this chapter important is that it represents the foundation of his entire story. When people look at successful individuals, they often begin the story at the moment fame arrives. But success rarely appears out of nowhere. Behind every major achievement are years of effort, setbacks, and personal sacrifices that remain invisible to the public. For Paul Hogan, those years were shared with Noeline. As he worked to support his family, life moved at a steady pace. There were bills to pay, responsibilities to meet, and goals to pursue. The future was still unwritten. No one was treating him like a celebrity because he was not one. He was simply another hard-working Australian trying to make life better for the people he cared about. That reality created a bond that was very different from relationships formed after fame arrives. Relationships built before success often carry a unique kind of connection. They are formed without the influence of wealth, status, or public attention. They grow through shared experiences, mutual struggles, and the challenges of everyday life. Those experiences create memories that remain powerful even decades later. As the family grew, so did the responsibilities resting on Hogan's shoulders. Providing for a large family required dedication and persistence. Every decision carried weight because it affected the people depending on him. At the time, there was little reason to imagine that everything was about to change. Yet sometimes life takes unexpected turns when they are least expected. What began as a series of opportunities in entertainment gradually started opening doors that had previously seemed impossible. Hogan's natural humor, confidence, and ability to connect with people that began attracting attention. Opportunities that once felt out of reach suddenly appeared within grasp. Little by little, his world started expanding. For many families, this type of change can be exciting. New opportunities often bring hope and possibility, but they can also introduce new pressures. The routines that once felt predictable begin to shift. Priorities change. Demands increase. Time becomes harder to control. As Hogan's career gained momentum, the balance between personal life and professional ambition became more complicated. The challenge was not unique to him. Countless families have faced similar situations when one person's career begins accelerating at an extraordinary pace. The very success that promises a brighter future can also place strain on the relationships that helped make that success possible. Still, Noeline remained an important figure during this critical stage of his life. She had witnessed the journey from the beginning. She had seen the struggles before the victories. She had experienced the years when recognition and fame were nothing more than distant possibilities. That shared history became an important part of Hogan's personal story. Looking back, it is easy to focus on the worldwide success that eventually followed. Yet those achievements were built upon years that came before them. The foundation was laid long before Hollywood became involved. This chapter of Hogan's life reminds us that every success story has unseen contributors. Some people play their role quietly, away from cameras and public praise. Their influence may not generate headlines, but it becomes woven into the larger story in ways that cannot be ignored. For Paul Hogan, the years spent building a life with Noeline represented exactly that kind of chapter. But while one part of his story was strengthening, another force was beginning to reshape his future in ways nobody could fully anticipate. The entertainment opportunities that first seemed exciting would soon grow into something much larger. The local success that brought attention to his talent would eventually open the door to international fame. And with that fame would come new experiences, new challenges, and new relationships that would forever alter the course of his life. The world was about to meet Paul Hogan. And once that happened, everything, including the relationships that had defined his earlier years, would face pressures unlike anything they had experienced before. The quiet life that once felt familiar was slowly disappearing. In its place came a future filled with extraordinary opportunities, enormous expectations, and life-changing encounters. Among those encounters would be one meeting that would eventually become one of the most talked-about chapters of his personal life. A chapter that began when a simple Australian success story exploded onto the world stage and changed everything forever. When Crocodile Dundee changed everything. Success often arrives slowly. It builds through years of hard work, persistence, and small opportunities. Then, sometimes, everything changes in a single moment. For Paul Hogan, that moment arrived when Crocodile Dundee burst onto screens and became a worldwide phenomenon. What had started as a promising entertainment career suddenly transformed into something much bigger than anyone expected. The film captured audiences across different countries, cultures, and generations. Viewers were drawn to Hogan's natural charm, easy humor, and unique Australian personality. Almost overnight, he became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. The change was extraordinary. One day, he was known mainly in Australia. The next, millions of people across the globe knew his name. His image appeared everywhere. Interview requests multiplied. Public appearances increased. The attention surrounding him grew larger with every passing month. For many people, this level of success sounds like a dream come true, and in many ways, it was. Years of hard work had finally produced remarkable rewards. Opportunities that once seemed impossible were now becoming reality. Doors opened that had previously been closed. Financial security increased. Professional achievements continued to grow. From the outside, it looked like a perfect success story. But fame has two sides. The side the public sees is often exciting and glamorous. It is filled with celebrations, recognition, and accomplishments. The side that remains hidden is usually much more complicated. It can bring pressure, distance, and challenges that few people understand. As Hogan's fame continued to grow, the demands on his time increased as well. Travel became constant, professional responsibilities multiplied, and expectations reached new heights. The simple routines of everyday life became more difficult to preserve. Like many successful figures, he faced the challenge of balancing career and personal relationships. Time once devoted to family was often claimed by work, while moments that belonged to loved ones were increasingly shared with audiences, media, and business commitments. For Hogan, these changes were happening on a massive scale. The success of Crocodile Dundee did not simply make him famous, it turned him into an international star. With that status came responsibilities and opportunities that reached far beyond anything he had previously experienced. At the same time, his personal life was entering a period of growing complexity. The challenges were not necessarily visible to the public. Fans saw the smiling movie star. They saw the successful actor enjoying the peak of his career. What they could not see were the personal adjustments taking place behind the scenes. This is often the hidden cost of extraordinary success. People celebrate the achievements, but rarely witness the sacrifices that accompany them. They see the destination without fully understanding the journey. As the years passed, the gap between Paul Hogan's private world and public image continued to widen. The man audiences watched on screen was becoming a global celebrity. Yet behind that image was still a human being, trying to navigate the demands of fame while maintaining important personal connections. It was not an easy task. History has shown that many famous figures struggle with this balance. Some relationships survive the pressure. Others begin to change under its weight. Success can strengthen certain parts of life while quietly challenging others. For Hogan, the period following Crocodile Dundee became one of the most transformative chapters he would ever experience. His career was reaching heights few entertainers ever achieve. The world seemed fascinated by everything he did. New opportunities continued appearing one after another. Then something happened that would add an entirely new dimension to his personal story. During the Crocodile Dundee journey, Hogan worked closely with a talented actress who played a major role in the film's success. Their on-screen connection was impossible to ignore. Audiences noticed it immediately. Critics noticed it too. At first, it was simply part of the movie's appeal. But as time passed, that professional connection began attracting increasing public interest. Fans became curious about the relationship between the two stars. The chemistry people admired on screen seemed unusually natural and genuine. Questions began to emerge. What exactly was happening behind the scenes? Was there more to the story than audiences realized? And could this new connection eventually become one of the most important relationships of Hogan's life? At that stage, nobody could predict how significant the answer would become. What started as a working relationship was about to evolve into one of the most talked-about romances connected to Paul Hogan's name. It would capture public attention, reshape his personal life, and introduce a woman who would become inseparable from one of the most famous chapters of his journey. The Hollywood romance that captured the world.
Do you think the movie's more powerful because they actually were sort of falling in love over a period of time? Maybe whether they...
I do.
Yeah, it was actual love story.
It's a true love story, and
Yeah.
they stayed together for 20 years.
By the time Crocodile Dundee became a worldwide sensation, Paul Hogan's life was moving faster than ever before. The film had achieved a level of success that few people could have predicted. Audiences everywhere embraced the story, and the man at its center suddenly found himself living a reality completely different from the one he had known for most of his life. Yet while millions of viewers were focused on the adventure unfolding on screen, another story was quietly taking shape behind the scenes. That story involved Linda Kozlowski. When Linda joined the cast of Crocodile Dundee, she was still working to establish herself in Hollywood. Like many actors, she hoped for opportunities that could help move her career forward. The film would eventually do exactly that, but it would also bring something neither she nor Hogan could have fully anticipated. As filming progressed, the two spent long periods working together. They shared scenes, traveled for production, and became familiar with each other's personalities. What began as a professional partnership gradually developed into a connection that many people around them could not ignore. One reason audiences loved Crocodile Dundee was because the relationship between the two main characters felt believable. Their interactions seemed natural rather than forced. The warmth and chemistry viewers saw on screen helped make the story memorable. But unlike many movie romances, this connection did not end when filming stopped. As the film's popularity exploded, public interest in Hogan and Linda increased as well. Fans became fascinated by the possibility that the bond they witnessed in theaters might exist beyond the cameras. The more attention the movie received, the more curiosity surrounded its two stars. Soon, what had once been speculation became reality. Their relationship moved beyond the professional world and into their personal lives. For many fans, it felt like a real-life continuation of the story they had fallen in love with on screen. The adventurous Australian star and his American leading lady seemed like the perfect match. The public could not get enough of it. Magazine covers, television interviews, and entertainment reports regularly featured their relationship. Wherever they appeared, public curiosity followed. Their romance became one of the most discussed celebrity relationships of its time. More importantly, it entered Hogan's life during a pivotal period. His career was thriving, his name was known worldwide, and opportunities continued to grow. Amid the excitement, Linda became a major presence in his personal life. While Noeline belonged to the years before global fame, Linda became closely linked to Hogan's rise to international success. As their relationship strengthened, they built a life together and welcomed a son, adding a meaningful new chapter to their story. From the outside, everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. They appeared happy. They shared major life experiences. They traveled the world together. They represented a celebrity couple that many people admired. But appearances can sometimes hide realities that outsiders never fully see. Like any relationship, theirs faced challenges that were not always visible to the public. The demands of fame, career pressures, and personal expectations do not disappear simply because two people care deeply for each other. In fact, those pressures often become even more intense when a relationship exists under constant public attention. Every decision can become a headline. Every appearance can attract speculation. Every challenge can feel larger because millions of people are watching. For years, however, Hogan and Linda remained one of the entertainment world's most recognizable couples. Their relationship became closely linked to the Crocodile Dundee legacy itself. For many fans, it was difficult to think about one without thinking about the other. The connection seemed that strong. Yet beneath the success, admiration, and public fascination, time was slowly introducing changes that neither fame nor popularity could prevent. Relationships evolve. People grow. Priorities shift. The circumstances that bring two individuals together are not always the same circumstances that sustain them forever. As the years passed, subtle signs began suggesting that the fairy tale image people admired might not tell the entire story. The couple who once appeared inseparable would eventually face difficult decisions about their future. The romance that had captivated audiences around the world would encounter challenges that could not be solved by fame, success, or public affection. For fans, the possibility seemed almost impossible to imagine. How could a relationship that looked so strong from the outside face serious trouble? The answer would reveal an important truth about love and celebrity. Sometimes the greatest struggles happen far away from cameras, hidden from the very people who believe they know the story. The love that defined his legacy. From the outside, Paul Hogan's life looked like a remarkable success story. He had achieved international fame, earned the admiration of millions, and built a career that placed him among Australia's most recognizable entertainers. Many people assumed that someone who had reached such heights must have found lasting happiness in every area of life. But life is rarely that simple. Behind the achievements, the awards, and the public image was a man whose personal journey included difficult choices, painful endings, and lessons that only became clearer with time. As the years passed, the relationship between Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski began facing challenges that were not visible to the public. Like many long-term relationships, theirs evolved as circumstances changed. The excitement that once surrounded their romance could not protect them from the realities that every couple eventually encounters. People often imagine that fame makes relationships easier. In reality, it can create new pressures. Constant attention from the media, demanding schedules, and the struggle to balance personal and professional responsibilities can test even the strongest partnerships. For a long time, Hogan and Linda remained one of the entertainment world's most admired couples. They had shared unforgettable experiences, raised a son together, and built a life that many people envied. Yet even relationships that appear strong from the outside can be facing battles that nobody else sees. Eventually, their marriage came to an end.
He and Linda still get along great. This is after they'd separated. She's like, look after him. You know, he's not 30 anymore. He thinks he is.
For fans who had followed their story for years, the news came as a surprise. Many had viewed them as a couple whose bond seemed unbreakable. Yet the ending served as a reminder that relationships are often far more complicated than they appear from a distance. The separation marked the closing of another major chapter in Hogan's life. By that point, he had experienced two deeply significant relationships that had shaped different parts of his journey. One belonged to the years before worldwide fame. The other became inseparable from the years when he stood at the peak of international success. As time moved forward, Hogan found himself in a position that many people eventually reached. He began looking back. There is something unique about growing older. When people are young, they are usually focused on where they are going. They chase goals, pursue opportunities, and think about the future. But with age often comes reflection. Attention slowly shifts from what might happen tomorrow to what has already happened. For Hogan, those reflections appear to have brought both gratitude and honesty. Rather than presenting himself as someone who had always made the right choices, he became increasingly willing to acknowledge his own shortcomings. That honesty stood out because many public figures spend their lives protecting an image of perfection. Hogan seemed more interested in understanding the lessons than defending the past. As he reflected on his relationships, he recognized that success alone could not guarantee happiness. Fame could open doors around the world, but it could not automatically preserve the people who mattered most. Wealth could provide comfort, but it could not solve every personal challenge. These realizations gave his story a deeper meaning. The more people examined his life, the more they discovered that the most important chapters were not necessarily the ones connected to movie premieres or box office records. Instead, they were often linked to the people who stood beside him during different stages of his journey. This brings us back to the question that has fascinated so many fans. Which woman left the deepest mark on Paul Hogan's heart? The truth may be more meaningful than any simple answer. Life does not always allow us to measure love like a competition. Different people touch our lives in different ways. One person may help shape who we become. Another may help us experience some of our greatest moments. Both influences can be powerful, even if they are impossible to compare. Noeline Edwards was part of the foundation. She knew Hogan before the fame, before the headlines, and before the world knew his name. She shared the ordinary years that helped build the life he would later live. She witnessed the struggles, the responsibilities, and the uncertainty that existed long before success arrived. For that reason alone, her place in his story remains significant. Linda Kozlowski represented something entirely different. She entered his life during a period when everything was changing. She became part of the years that brought international recognition, extraordinary opportunities, and global attention. Together, they shared experiences that few people could ever imagine. Their relationship became one of the defining stories of Hogan's most famous era. Her influence became inseparable from some of the biggest chapters of his adult life. When viewed this way, the question may not be about choosing one woman over another. Instead, it becomes a story about understanding how different relationships contribute to different parts of a person's journey. One helped shape the beginning. The other helped define the height of the adventure. Together, they became essential pieces of the larger story. Now, at 86 years old, Hogan's life offers a lesson that reaches far beyond celebrity culture. It reminds us that the people we meet often become the true markers of our lives. Careers rise and fall. Public attention fades. Achievements eventually become history. But the impact of meaningful relationships can remain long after everything else changes. When people look back on their lives, they rarely measure their happiness by awards or financial success alone. More often, they think about the individuals who stood beside them during important moments, the memories they created together, and the lessons those relationships taught them. That may be the most revealing part of Paul Hogan's story. The legendary actor who conquered Hollywood leaves behind more than a successful career. He leaves behind a deeply human journey filled with love, mistakes, growth, and reflection. And perhaps that is why his story continues to resonate with so many people today. Because beneath the fame, beneath the movies, and beneath the larger-than-life public image, Paul Hogan's greatest story was never really about becoming a star. It was about the people who helped shape the man behind the legend. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.